What signs can you recognize if your wife is cheating on you? Was it a sudden change in her mood? Or did she start leaving the house in the evenings to go out? Did she say she always wanted to have fun with the girls? Or something else out of those hundreds of little things worth paying attention to? As for me, well, let's just say it was just a keen intuition. When I came home from work, she was on the phone, and as soon as I crossed the threshold, she hurriedly said, "I gotta go, he's home, bye," and immediately pressed off, looking at me innocently. That was all it took for that horrible, gut-turning suspicion to flare up inside me. I thought about asking her who she was talking to, but she could make up anything, couldn't she? Like that she was chatting with a salesman from the couch store to order 2 marvelous massagers for the relentless war on cellulite for the price of 1. That kind of thought couldn't have just popped into my head out of the blue, right? There must have been a worm of doubt inside my mind about my wife for some time now. I didn't like it myself, and I didn't want it to keep gnawing at me day after day. I'm not good with change in my life. I guess you could say I'm one of those old-fashioned guys who stick to the principle of, it's better to stay out of something that's working fine, lest you break it and make it worse than it was. I guess it's time to introduce myself and tell you about my family. I'm Ron, and Cindy and I have been safely married for 24 years. We have 4 children, 2 adults and 2 teenagers. We're not millionaires, but what we have now is enough to make a decent living. At least we don't have any debts to anyone. Cindy and I own a comfortable little house, and the mortgage is paid off. Our cars may not be brand new, but we don't have to pay monthly payments on them. We probably still have a few small credit card debts, but that's about it. So all in all, we are an average American family, and we try to live within our means. Every weekday we work, we eat, we take care of our house. The younger kids go to school, and on weekends we sometimes go out as a family. Likewise, Cindy and I try to keep up with everything our kids are into, whether it's sports, art classes, scouting, or any other activity they are involved in. Sometimes we even have dinner all together, around a common table in our close-knit family circle, which in these times, you might say, is a rarity. Cindy and I have a sex life that is probably the same as most middle-aged people. We make love once every 2 weeks or so. I might wish it were much more frequent, but you know it takes 2 to do the horizontal tango. And lately, Cindy has been, shall we say, not so keen on that kind of dancing. That was a pun, if anything. Because of my stupid supernatural intuition, I'm afraid I'm now going to have to be on the lookout for any strange signs from Cindy. It's like I don't trust her anymore, for no apparent reason. I'm just hoping that this nagging knot twisting inside my stomach is just normal indigestion and not a harbinger of what I suspect. My main problem is that I'm not a super sleuth or a 007. I'm just an average middle-aged man who doesn't know much about all the fancy hidden video cameras, phone tapping, computer hacking, and other spy stuff you may have heard or read about. And on top of all that, I'm not rich enough to be able to hire a private investigator to follow my wife, especially since I have no idea where I'm supposed to dig or what I'm looking for. Cindy handles all of our finances, so I have no idea how much she pays, to whom, or when. If I suddenly start going through all the paperwork, I'm sure she'll notice and will want to know why I'm suddenly buried in bills and receipts. What am I supposed to say to her? Honey, I've got some suspicious heaviness in my stomach. You're growing horns for me. Is that it? Yeah, and she's like, honey, I bet you'd rather go for a piss than do that shit. A little family history. Our marriage seems pretty normal, as it probably should be at this point in life and at our age. I met Cindy when we were both in our early 20s, dated for about a year, and then got married. About once every 2 years she had a baby. When the number of children reached 4, I got a little tired of the babies popping out of Cindy like those moles in a slot machine, so I had a vasectomy shortly after her last birth. So it was one of those nights when everyone who lives in our house, the 2 teenagers, my wife and I had dinner together. The kids talked a little about their day at school, and Cindy told us about her part-time job at the library. I should say that after our 2 youngest started college, Cindy got a little bored with being home alone, and after a while got a job at the local library. That's where she worked part-time, and her work schedule was irregular. Maybe the library was one of those places I needed to check out. But how was I supposed to do that? It's not like I could just take a day off work to sit right in front of the entrance to the fucking library and watch who goes in and out of there and who Cindy chats with. Hell, then it'd be every first-timer in the damn place. She's a librarian. It's her job to talk to the smart ones every time. Well, fuck the library. I got a better idea where I can catch her. She was going to her women's card club tonight, so I guess I could start my private investigation right after she left the house. To do that, I'd have to covertly follow her in my good old pickup truck. Oh, come on. You're yelling that I'm on the verge of getting caught. Again, I can hardly afford a rental car, as husbands on the trail almost always easily do in all those stories about cheating wives. Anyway, Cindy left to cut cards, and I quietly slipped out of the house a few minutes after her. I knew where she was going because she told me so herself, and even left a phone number where I could reach her if I needed to talk to her. I lost her car, or rather it had somehow gotten ripped off on the way while I was stuck, so I just drove to Marge's house, where I knew this womanizing poker tournament was going to be held. When I got there, I saw Cindy's car among the other autos parked in front of her friend Marge's house. I waited a few minutes, scanning the street to make sure no one else would show up, and then I got out of my pickup truck, which I'd parked a couple houses away from my target, crept up to one of the windows and peered cautiously inside. When I craned my neck to peer into the back of the room, I saw 2 card tables with 4 women sitting at each table and playing cards. Some of them were smoking, others were periodically sampling the drinks on the table, and all of them seemed to be chatting enthusiastically with each other, slapping cards on the table and occasionally bursting out laughing. Shit. Cards, money, and no guns. Just 8 giggling broads in the room, no stallion with a foot-long dick, and no debauchery whatsoever. And I was already anticipating that I would descend upon this nest of whoremongers and put a stop to their unbridled bacchanalia. My investigation was at a standstill, so I slowly backed up to get back to my pickup truck. Of course, by the law of meanness, as soon as I started to back up, I stepped in a pile of dog shit. Rock, I said through gritted teeth, waddling sideways like a drunken crab on thickly greased shoes toward the truck. Goddamn shitting dogs, and dog-owning hoopos who feed their mutts and then let them run around. And good, unsuspecting guys, as a result, have to deal with the demining of the left surprises. Anyway, I had to clean dog shit off my shoes for about 10 minutes before I could get back in my truck. Holy crap. They still stunk. It was a good thing I opened all the windows, increased my speed, and managed not to get in the way of the inspector, or he would have given me a ticket for the particularly stinky environmental plume behind me. Well, the first outing ended in a fiasco, but I didn't give up. My stomach, like a trusty compass, was telling me that treason was close at hand. When I got home and quickly threw off my shit suits, I went to the laundry basket and looked for my wife's bras and panties. Good thing she hasn't done her laundry this week. I can smell I'm on the right track. Taking her panties out of the hamper, I carefully felt their entire crotch and held the gusset up to my nose. Bruh, they stink. Hey, shut up. I don't give a shit what you're saying. Used panties that have been in the hamper for days stink, period. Whether they're from the crotch of a respectable family woman or a fun-loving hottie, it doesn't matter. It's not at all the same when you're horny and dive your nose between your woman's legs. Everything smells good during sex. But those pieces of fabric, with whitish streaks and yellow spots, that had been in the basket for almost a week, and now swayed in front of my nose, smelled not even lilies or violets. All right, let the wife's panties be a bummer. Let's move on. I went through her closet looking for revealing dresses and clothes that looked inappropriate. Then I went through every drawer in her dresser. Nothing suspicious. Just zero. I found a binder of invoices lying in the file cabinet in the office. I flipped through the fucking bills until the damn numbers were bouncing around in front of my eyes like balls in a lotto drum. Once again, I found nothing out of the ordinary, unless you counted the hole in the bagel. Mother of all honesty, Cindy was good at hiding evidence. For a cheating wife, she was great. I got on the computer and entered her password into a pop-up window. She had told me the keyword a long time ago. Plus, just to be sure, we had printed it out and hung it next to the computer on the wall. I went through all of Cindy's emails, which, come to think of it, was pretty stupid since she and I shared an account and we'd both used the same email address for years. If there was any dirt in there, I would have noticed it long ago. Not surprisingly, poking back and forth in the mail, I couldn't find a damn thing. To think of it, another dead end. Shit. I've been digging around for 3 hours trying to find anything against Cindy, but I've got nothing. And when I read all these cheating stories on my computer, there's always some shit in them. Secret phone records, motel bills, dropped panties, unexplained spending, handprints on asses and tits, and a million other clues. In these stories, they hire super-duper sneaky private investigators. They install clever phone-tapping devices. Then the cheating wives track down their walker husbands. Then the suddenly enlightened husbands catch their slutty broads. Oh yeah, they also make sure to take crisp color photos of cheaters practicing the Kama Sutra, shoot expository videos, and even catch strange men in the marital bed. Ooh. Where is all this stuff, I ask you? If I can't find shit, my Cindy must be a master at cover-ups and double-dealing. Just as I gave up and started to clean up my mess, the front door opened and Cindy walked in. I was kneeling in front of the laundry basket, holding her dirty panties in both hands. I froze in place. She froze, looking at me. I don't know whose eyes were bigger, but hers were definitely like cat saucers. "Okay, Ron, I think it's time we had a talk," she said slowly, keeping her gaze on me and approaching cautiously along the wall. "You followed me to Marge's, and then I saw your face peering out from behind the jamb of the open window. Then I heard you grunting somewhere in the darkness. Did you step in some dog poop?" She sniffed the air with her nose. "Oh yeah, that's right. So that's where Marge lets her doggy do her dirty deeds." "Doggy? Oh, really?" Judging by the pile I'm in, Marge is not a pet dog, she's King Kong. He's probably grinning his teeth at me from his kennel after I blew up his landmine. I was still sitting there with a stupid smile on my face, a pair of underpants in my hands, and my eyes wandering back and forth. There was no way out. The skin on my face and neck felt hot for some reason. My throat was dry, and in general I suddenly lost the gift of English speech. Now I come home and I see you sitting there sniffing my dirty laundry. If I didn't know you better, I'd think you didn't trust me. Do you really think I'm cheating on you, Ron? Yeah, I don't know, Cindy. I have, this bad gut feeling. And I've been having this, all day since this morning, I stammered, mumbling something in my defense. "Come with me, honey, and let's talk." My wife turned and walked toward the living room. I threw the laundry in the hamper, got up and followed her, landing on the couch. Cindy sat down next to me, folded her hands in her lap, and looked at me intently. "Were you reading erotic stories again? On your lunch break at work?" she asked rather shrewdly. I nodded embarrassedly. Well, yes." "And there were stories about cheating wives?" Cindy asked. "You guessed it." I sighed again. "Tell me, did you think of me when you read all those stories about cheating wives?" "Of course I did," I mumbled, averting my gaze to the side. "Otherwise I wouldn't have followed you to Marge's tonight. Besides, when I got home from work, you were on the phone. You were on the phone with someone, and as soon as I walked in, you hurriedly said, 'I gotta go,' and hung up. Why don't you explain?" I went on the offensive. Cindy looked at me with raised eyebrows and smiled broadly, shaking her head. "God, I don't even know if I should be mad at you or just hug you," she grinned. I frowned and stared back at her and said, "Still, who were you talking to when I walked in? Please don't lie to me." "I wasn't going to," she shrugged. "Actually, I was talking to your mother. She calls me almost every day, as you probably know." "Wait, that call was the reason for your big investigation? Oh, geez, Clinton." Now I felt stupid. Not for the first time today, though. How could I have forgotten about my mom? Another one of my phone-happy moms. Cindy tilted her head to the side and smiled slyly at my guilty conscience. Then she moved closer and put her hands on top of mine, squeezing them lightly. "Ron, darling, tell me, honestly, have I ever done anything to make you suspicious or distrustful of me?" "No," I admitted. "It was just my gut feeling." "Honey," Cindy continued to smile, "you're a miracle. If I didn't love you so much, I'd probably freak out at the numbers you're pulling." She wrapped her hands around my cheeks and said the next words, looking me straight in the eye. "You're my favorite man, the one and only, no matter how weird you are sometimes. I love you with all my heart, even if I don't say it often enough. Maybe we don't make love enough, but we can fix that. And the best thing to do is to do it right now." With those words, she took my hand and led me into the bedroom, locked the door, dimmed the lights, and then began undressing me. "So, do you feel better now?" With sly demons bouncing in her eyes, she asked. "Cindy," I replied, turning my head on its side and again stroking her tantalizing curves with my gaze. "You're the best and I love you. But what about those warning signals coming from my gut?" She smiled, then giggled, and finally just started laughing uncontrollably. Holding her stomach with one hand and wiping away tears with the other, Cindy pulled a blister of pills out of the medicine cabinet and tossed it on my bed. "Here, take 2 of these, honey. You only have indigestion," she said. As soon as I popped the wheels and froze, listening to the rumbling response of my stomach, my wife gave me a stern look and added, "And honey, please stop sniffing my dirty underwear. It's disgusting." I agree, what the hell? When Cindy's right, she's right. Have you ever seen a dead body? I don't mean in a funeral home beautifully arranged in a coffin. I mean just dead, with that awful stillness that comes to a body when the soul, spirit, life force, whatever, leaves it. I'm a police officer. I live in a small town, and I've never even investigated a murder, let alone seen a murder victim. But I have seen many corpses, fresh corpses if you will, killed by accidents simply because they got too old, although doctors never call it that, several times by suicide. These suicides were probably the worst bodies you could ever see. I mean, they're dead because they wanted to be dead, cruel to the survivors. My story starts with me coming home from work, not early, not late, just at my usual time. It's the middle of winter, so I use the remote control to open the garage door as I pull into the driveway. My wife's car is there in its usual spot. No other people's car in the garage or driveway. I parked on my usual side of the garage. There is a lot of usual going on here. I walked into the house from the garage, no premonitions, no worries, just a normal homecoming after work. Walking into the kitchen, I called out, "Janie, I'm home." No response. The beginnings of worry, not much worry yet, just a, "I wonder where she is" type worry. I walked through the kitchen into the hallway. No Janie, no sounds at all. I started up the stairs to the bedroom level, still no noise. My anxiety was getting more and more serious. Almost at the very top of the stairs, the anxiety intensified. A premonition surfaced. Something bad was happening. I actually pulled out my service weapon for the first time in years. Our bedroom door was closed. I took a breath in and partially exhaled to deal with the stress. I turned the doorknob and pushed the door open with my gun, and stopped. I immediately thought of crime, but as I stood there and analyzed what I saw, I realized it was probably worse than a crime. My wife was lying in our bed with that awful immobility that characterizes a dead body. I could have tried to run up to her and put my arms around her and shake her, and maybe discover that she wasn't really dead, that she was just sleeping or maybe unconscious. But next to her, with the same stillness, lay a man. I didn't go to the bed. I went to the windows and opened both of them as wide as I could, even in midwinter weather. Then I turned off the propane heater, which my wife had probably turned on to keep them warm while they did what they did. I did touch my wife's carotid artery, just to make sure, no pulse. I didn't touch the man, didn't go to the other side of the bed. I was in shock. I felt like I was moving in water or molasses, slow and hard. My thoughts were some mishmash of despair and trying to think the way a policeman must think when he discovers 2 dead bodies. I stood there with my arms down at my sides, trying unsuccessfully to look at my wife and not see the asshole next to her. When my brain started working a little better, I realized that I had holstered my gun at some point. That realization activated my brain. I walked out of the bedroom and down the stairs. I couldn't call my partner. He had just gotten home from work, and there was nothing he could do to help with this mess. I mean, why ruin his evening? I decided to call my boss, Captain Caparelli. Caparelli, Detective Squad. "Dave," I said, and thought, as I had a million times, that David was an odd name for an Italian kid. Maybe his mom had a relative named David, but... "Hey, who's this?" Dave, this is Jack Thomas, and I couldn't go on. "Jack, what's up? You just finished your shift. Did you get home okay? Yeah, Dave, listen, I need you to come to my house with a team, an ambulance, I guess, to a crime scene, but, no sirens, just quiet. I knew my voice didn't sound very coherent. No, Jack, I don't understand. Now take a deep breath, exhale a little, and tell me what's going on. I almost laughed when I heard him remind me of the stress reliever we all had to practice when we needed it. Dave, yeah, okay. Look, I had an accident at home. Just come to my house with the team, okay? Jack, I'm on my way. I think the sound of my voice convinced him that something serious was going on. I just sat there in the living room, waiting for the circus that was about to descend on me and that bedroom upstairs. I couldn't go back upstairs, but I managed to open the front door. Captain Caparelli walked in a few minutes later, followed by 2 uniformed officers, 2 EMTs, and a guy I knew was our local crime scene investigator. Dave raised his hand and they all stopped. Then he walked over and sat down next to me. Jack, before we go any further, how about you hand me your service weapon? I looked at him in surprise, but then realized I shouldn't be surprised. Judging by my incoherent phone call, he was probably wondering what I could do. Sure, Dave, here it is, I said, handing it over. See, it wasn't fired. Actually, I never fired it in the line of duty. Okay, thank you. Now, could you tell us or maybe show us what's going on? I stood up about 100 years older than I was an hour ago and led him upstairs. Again, he gestured for the others to wait. We reached the end of the stairs, and I gestured for him to go into what used to be my and Janie's bedroom. I would never sleep there again, and neither would she. So it certainly wasn't our bedroom anymore. I recovered a little from the initial shock and walked into the bedroom following him. Dave, this is Janie. You might recognize her from the department parties. I don't know who this asshole is. I came home from work, went upstairs, and found them like this. The heater was on. I turned it off and immediately opened both windows. That's why it's so cold in here. I didn't touch either of them, only felt Janie's carotid artery to see if there was a pulse. There wasn't. Then I got out, went downstairs, and called you. I think I was in a bit of shock when I called, and I apologize for that. I think I'm still a little bit in shock, but I'm coping. I know you need to process that scene. I'd like to wait downstairs. I really don't want to stay up here. Jesus, Jack, hell yeah, go downstairs. Wait, I'll go with you and get a team together to deal with this. He got them all together and they set to work. A short while later, an ambulance arrived with 2 folding gurneys with wrapped molds on them. Someone had brought out a heater, I think, to test it. And Dave sat down next to me again. Jack, I know this is a terrible time for you, but I have to ask. Do you know this man? I mean the man upstairs. I tried not to look at him. Not very professional of me, but no, I don't think I've ever seen him. I'm going to show his driver's license, just the photo part, and ask again. Have you ever seen him? Do you know him? I did look at the picture, actually studied it. Not to see if I knew the asshole, but to try to see what Janie saw in him. But I just couldn't see anything. No, Dave. I've never seen him. I don't know who he is, and maybe worse, I don't see any magic. No attraction. Nothing that would draw Janie to him that would... And I started crying in front of Dave and the guys at the crime scene. I tried to stop. I knew they'd tell the whole sordid story all over the department. I knew people would feel sorry for me, but at the same time whisper about how I'd failed to satisfy my wife, how I was a cuckold. At some point, my partner Mike Blankenship and his wife Molly showed up. Dave disappeared and Mike and Molly sat with me, gave me something to drink, and finally took me into the kitchen to try to feed me. No one said much. They just sat with me. Molly held my hand. They both said it would get better. Eventually, they kind of picked me up and walked me to their car. We drove to their house. Molly gave me sleeping pills, and they put me to bed in their guest room. I had never taken sleeping pills before, and I think the pills caused me to have strange dreams that night. Dreams about Janie and me, Janie and an asshole, Janie and some other man. Eventually, the effects of the pills wore off and I woke up early, still a dark winter morning. I lay there thinking about my now-deceased marriage, wondering why Janie had cheated, for how long, with one asshole or with others, many others. Bad thoughts that come to mind in the dark in a strange house. Did she love this guy? Was she going to leave me? We'd been married 10 years, had no children. Neither of us was a fan of children. And 4 months ago, we went on a Caribbean cruise to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. I thought we had a lot of fun, and I know we had a lot of sex, and I thought the sex was good. We even went nude swimming on the beach on St. Martin. After our shower, the sex was amazing. Finally, she cried out, "Jackie, Jackie, 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 you killed me. I'll never be able to get out of this bed." Funny choice of words in retrospect. And now, in the Blankenship guest room, I cried again, remembering that time on the ship. When Janie recovered a little, I took the brush and began brushing her hair, something I rarely did. For me, brushing her hair was something even more intimate than sex. I could lick the most intimate parts of her body, and I did it enthusiastically. I enjoyed it, and I think she enjoyed it. But brushing her hair somehow touched a string in me. I remember that day on the ship, running the brush through her hair, untangling the tangles that had formed after we had rolled around on the bed, and crying, because I loved her so much. And now, lying in the dark, I cry again because I know it's all gone, and maybe it never was. Finally, I heard a noise in the house. Got up, took a quick shower in the bathroom, put on the same clothes I had on the night before, and wandered into the kitchen. Molly was already there making breakfast. Coffee was ready. She didn't say anything, just hugged me, and it was the right thing to do. The feel of a woman's warm body, her arms around me, the smell of her hair, gave me more comfort that morning than any words could. We stood like that for a minute or so, and then she gently pushed me away. "Have some coffee, Jack, and some breakfast. I think you need both this morning." "Thanks, Molly, you're right. I probably haven't eaten anything since lunch yesterday." "Huh, Molly?" She turned away from the stove to look at me. "Thank you for the hug. It means a lot to me." "Well, Jack, you mean a lot to me." "Me too, partner," Mike said as he walked into the kitchen. "I know you just got the worst handout life can give you, but I also know you're a tough nut to crack and you'll get through this shit show." Molly and Mike didn't go to work. After breakfast, they took me to a nearby park. Mike tricked me into chasing a soccer ball with him. Then Molly tried to get me to play tennis, and then they gave up trying to distract me. We sat down at the picnic table, and I just looked at Mike. "Okay, partner," he said. "Obviously fun and games aren't working. So how about I tell you the news about yesterday? Would that be better?" "Mike, you know it would. I need information, not distraction." "Okay." Cell phone rings. I called the office early this morning, and I'll pass on what I was told. The guy's name was James Johnson. He was an executive at a lumber export company. Wife is a housewife who takes care of their 2 kids, 10 and 8 years old. She got hysterical last night when Robert O'Toole, you know Robert, right? I nodded. Robert O'Toole was our best cop in death notification work. Well, he and the pastor went to their house to give her the news, just the notice, and the news of the cause of death, and she got hysterical. I think eventually she came to her senses a little bit. Her parents came in, and O'Toole and the pastor left. That's when things must have gotten really interesting. The TV news was already running a story about a malfunctioning propane tank and 2 people, not married to each other, dying of carbon monoxide poisoning. Mrs. Johnson must have seen this because she went a little crazy. She started leaving her husband, well, her late husband at that point. Anyway, she started throwing his stuff out on the front lawn, and about that time his parents showed up, I guess unaware of the story on TV. She attacks them, I think, for what a nasty son they raised. One of them calls 911 and a patrol car pulls up. Then the landlady really freaks out. She grabs a knife from somewhere and tries to stab one of the responding cops, who turns out to be a woman. The police officers who arrive must have been unaware of the earlier event, because one of the 2 patrolmen hits her with a stun gun. This causes her parents to get into a fight, and more cops are called in. And of course, the TV van shows up. Eventually, enough superiors arrive to calm everyone down. No one goes to jail, and I understand that everyone apologizes. "Oh my God, it's a shit show. I had no idea what kind of bad show you were talking about." "Yeah, the captain asked me to keep you out of the office for a few days until he calls and says you can come back. You and I are both on full pay now, so that's good. He said it might be good for you to get away, maybe for a week, like somewhere warm, maybe a cruise." "Yeah, right now I feel like I'm on a cruise." "Well, I think he thinks it might help you to be away from this show. Give you some time to recover from what your wife did, you know? Mike and Molly, you guys are great friends, and I know you and Caparelli are doing well, but I need to stay here. I can't make sense of what happened if I'm somewhere far away on a cruise ship. Besides, I couldn't tell them about my last cruise with Janie and how I cried about it last night. I'll call Caparelli tomorrow and tell him I plan to stay here, figure things out, and get back to work when I'm ready. And that's what I've done. I got a temporary apartment. I just couldn't live in that house anymore. I tried to sell it, but the realtor, a buddy's wife, told me the house wasn't selling well when the event happened there. She suggested I rent it out for a while, and then she could sell it when the story became old news. I ended up renting it to a young couple who had decent jobs but no money for a down payment. Maybe they can be my buyers in the future. The coroner's hearing was exactly 1 month after the 2 deaths. I had to testify along with Caparelli and the other guys who were there that day. The verdict was indeed in accidental death from carbon monoxide poisoning due to a faulty propane gas heater. It turned out that the heater had been recalled because it was defective and the manufacturer had declared bankruptcy, I guess because of the number of deaths attributed to the heater. Janie and I missed the recall notice and never thought about the dangers of using the heater. Because of the bankruptcy, any claims I could have made against the heater manufacturer were useless. But I got some good news from our insurance coverage department. The department covered all employees with a $500,000 life insurance policy and withheld $12 monthly per pay period for the same coverage for our wives. And plus, there was a double indemnity for accidental death. That meant I received $1 million tax-free. I never learned anything about the affair between Janie and this asshole. How long it lasted, how they met, how it started, how they felt about each other. That last unknown was the worst part for me. What did they feel for each other? And what would it mean for their spouses? From the rumors, the asshole's widow was a real bitch, trying to blame everyone but her husband for what happened. Maybe he wanted to leave his wife and was trying to get Janie to leave me. Or maybe Janie and the asshole had already decided to leave their spouses and run off together. Or maybe they were just fuck buddies. Or who the fuck knows? This is going to haunt me for a long, long time. For now, I just go to work and hope for a better future. I know my wife is cheating on me, I just know it. But damn it, I can't catch her. It's Saturday morning and I'm sitting at my lawyer's office. My lawyer, Roscoe Noble, handled my divorce from my first wife, so he's experienced in these matters. He hired a private investigator to look into my suspicions. What's wrong with me? My first wife started cheating on me almost before the new sheets came off her wedding bed. Now my new wife is doing the same thing. I must have, "Please give me horns," written on my forehead. The private investigator shook my hand and introduced himself as Tom Pickens. He was a slightly overweight, short man in khaki pants and an unassuming polo shirt. He was unremarkable and would never stand out in a crowd. Probably a good trait for a private investigator. We all sat down. Roscoe said, "Okay, Tom, tell us what you found." Tom cleared his throat. "Yes, sir, Mr. Noble. I started working on the case Monday morning, right after we talked. I went straight to the college and saw Mrs. Ann Powers's car in her assigned parking space. I walked by her office and observed her in her office. I interrupted him. 'Tom, can you just give us an overview and include the details in your report?' Tom replied, 'Oh, sure, Mr. Powers.' Tom paused to gather his thoughts and then continued. 'I've had Mrs. Powers under surveillance all this week until last night. She leaves the house between 8 o'clock and 8:15, heads straight to college, and returns home between 4 o'clock and 5:30 p.m. Her daily routine seems normal enough. Conferences with students, faculty meetings, office work, trips to the library, and the like. She usually goes to the gym around 11 a.m. and then eats a bag lunch at her desk. There is only one unusual activity. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Mrs. Powers left college between 1 o'clock and 1:10 p.m., walked downtown, and walked into Henry's Continental Restaurant and Gourmet Food Store. She left there between 3:45 and 4:10. Roscoe asked, "Did she meet with anyone at lunch? Could you identify who with?" I interrupted. "No, Henry's only serves dinner on Tuesday and Saturday. It's one of our favorite restaurants. It's very popular with the academic crowd. The owner is Henry Manigault. He is a promising chef and restaurateur." Roscoe asked, "Anything between Anne and Henry? Any hint of attraction, stolen kisses, long hugs, and the like?" "Come on, Roscoe, this is the South. Women here kiss and hug everyone as if the 5-second acquaintance was a long-lost uncle or aunt. Or boyfriend." We all know each other, and there is nothing unusual between them that I know of. But then again, I'm only a husband, so I'm the last to know, I grumbled. Good. Is there any reasonably innocent explanation for why Anne spent 3 hours in a closed restaurant 3 times this week? Roscoe asked. I shrugged and said, Henry is a good-looking, outgoing guy. He flirts with all the women, including Anne, and they all adore him. So, who knows? Tom put in, Well, the restaurant has a gourmet food store that is open during regular business hours and offers cooking classes every other Saturday. However, when Mrs. Powers was there, no classes were offered. I can't imagine Mrs. Powers being able to entertain herself for 3 hours in that little store. I added dryly, I assure you it's impossible. Anne and fine dining? Definitely terra incognita for her. Tom continued, I walked around the store several times. I saw no sign of Mrs. Powers. Nor did Henry Manigault, and when someone asked for him, the clerk dryly replied that he was unavailable. I was drawing attention to myself, so I stopped going in. On Wednesday, my wife went in there several times. She didn't see Mrs. Powers either. I also charged the usual rates for my wife's time. Roscoe said, That's fair, Tom, no problem. What else do you have? Tom sighed. Roscoe said, Not much. It's a complicated case. Mrs. Powers must be the most skillful wife cheater I've ever encountered. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Powers. I just waved for him to go on. Tom continued, My wife is doing an electronic investigation and has been checking the contacts of both Mrs. Powers and Henry Manigault. She hasn't been able to find anything worthwhile on either of them. Henry is single and has had 1 or more girlfriends on a regular basis. But there is nothing scandalous about it. Although we have no information about his current girlfriend, he's definitely upbeat and cheerful. Apparently he hasn't had any affairs with married women, at least we couldn't find anything. Henry uses an online dating service, but a lot of singles do. Lately he's stopped socializing there. Mrs. Powers' electronic footprint is as clean as freshly fallen snow. We ran her financials. No new credit cards, no personal loans, no problems the credit scoring companies might have had. No public record, except that Mrs. Powers had a speeding ticket 4 years ago. Clean, decent history in every respect. Roscoe looked at me. I said, I did the homework you asked for. I went through 3 months of credit card payments and phone records. Nothing that I couldn't explain. I checked her cell phone while she was napping. No strange messages. No strange calls to unexplained numbers. Nothing on her home computer or her regular or university email accounts. I have all her passwords. She always mixes them up and has to ask me to remind her. She's a history major, not a technology major. I didn't find anything suspicious. Roscoe sat with his lips pressed together. Finally, he said to me, Jim, what I'm saying is that maybe you're just paranoid. That's understandable after your experience with your first gold-digging wife. I really like Anne. You two seem like the perfect couple. But this restaurant thing is very suspicious. I guess things aren't always what they seem. I sighed. It doesn't make any sense. Who would have sex for hours in a closed restaurant? Getting a hotel room is a hell of a lot more convenient. Or go to his house, he's single. The whole restaurant thing just sounds dubious. Roscoe suddenly began rummaging through a folder full of papers that looked like an accordion. After a minute, he said, Yeah, I might have something. Tom told me about Henry's restaurant visits on Wednesday night. I asked the paralegal to check everything I could find in the courthouse and city records on Henry. Here is Henry's application for a building permit, a 5-year-old application that includes a layout for remodeling the old Johnson's department store into his current restaurant. Roscoe turned over 2 sheets of floor plans so Tom and I could see them. He continued, Here's the first floor, the cooking store, restaurant and bar, restrooms, kitchen area, and storage. On the second floor is a large classroom, restrooms, storage area. And here, in the back, is an area designated as a studio apartment with its own bathroom and shower. We silently looked at the plans that showed the studio apartment. I said, Well, chefs have been known to work long hours. It might make sense to have an overnight stay there in the restaurant, but it's also undoubtedly a comfortable love nest. Roscoe nodded his head. That is indeed true. After a pause, he continued, Jim, I'm afraid Anne is messing with your head and entertaining Henry between the sheets. There's no use in gilding the lily. Tom, keep watching. Jim, keep your eyes and ears open on the home front. Anne is a sharp little thing and hides her handkerchief better than most others. She'll make a mistake. They always do. Then we'll nail her just like we nailed your first wife. On the way home, my head was splitting. With my first wife, I think I can understand her cheating. We got married too soon and too fast. She was studying art in her last year of college when we got married. A beautiful girl. She was also a self-centered social girl. Not to mention, she definitely expected to be high maintenance when she became a wife. As for me, I came from a simple construction family. I majored in civil engineering and was working on my MBA when we got married. My dad was drafted to Korea, was an Army engineer, came back and enrolled at Clemson through the Army draft. He then scraped together enough money to buy a concrete plant and made a small fortune in the post-war boom years. I realize now that my first wife saw me as a dollar sign, not a lifelong partner. She got more in the divorce than she ever could have gotten with her Bachelor of Arts degree. Dad had a stroke a few years ago and ended up taking over the concrete company. I brought modern engineering and business practices to an already successful company. We grew, and now we're pretty darn rich. My sister went to law school, and with all the construction litigation and the inevitable involvement in our cases, she became a pretty rich construction law guru in her own right. My first wife must be berating herself for not being more prudent and waiting until a more lucrative financial plum grew on the marriage tree. But my current wife, Anne, I just can't believe she's unfaithful either. We've been married for a little over 2 years now. She's 8 years younger than me, but she's an intelligent, mature woman with a good head. She has a doctorate in history and has been an assistant professor at a local college for 4 years now. We met in a Methodist Sunday school class for single adults shortly after she came to town. After dating for a year, we became engaged and then married 6 months later. We had a nice time, got to know each other, met each other's friends and families. We did everything right. Heck, I swear my family likes her more than me. Anne is my best friend, the sex is great, the family is friendly. I actually do all the cooking because Anne, God bless her, is a terrible cook. She has wasted her time becoming an academic muse rather than a domestic goddess. In January, Anne finished her book on the colonial warfare of the Yamasee Indians. We all expected it to be a typical bore from an academic history professor. I read this book as my marital duty and was blown away. Anne has a gift for telling a story as if it were a novel and bringing that long-ago tragedy to life. I read the whole thing in a Saturday. Holy crap, it's great. The professional and popular press has also liked the book. Anne has been interviewed by NPR and several local TV stations. She's even been invited to several book awards, and she's doing a lot of book signings and speaking engagements. Anne is over the moon about the success of her book, but she earned it with hard work. She jokes that when all the royalties are totaled, she'll produce the book for less than half the legal minimum wage. Nevertheless, the book and its professional and popular reception were a major factor in Anne's expected promotion to associate professor, perhaps next year or just afterward. But having been burned by milk, I'm blowing on water as well. Anne exhibits the classic signs of a cheating wife. Working so hard on her book, she has gained a few extra pounds. Not that I was foolish enough to mention it to her. The book came out in January, and she started working out at the gym in February. Now, in July, she's in the best fighting shape I've ever seen her in. She looks really good. Her first royalty checks were spent on some attractive, sexy outfits and lingerie. She laughed and said she was spoiling herself. This is uncharacteristic of her, as she is an old-fashioned Methodist cheapskate. She teased me, "Don't I love seeing her in her new lingerie?" I'm delighted, of course. But I wonder who else enjoys the sight of my wife in this sexy lingerie. She is also very affectionate. Is this just a release from the pressure of writing a book or a guilty conscience? Anne isn't teaching this summer, but she still goes to her office every day. She's working on initial ideas for the second book she's telling me about. She also has 3 graduate students who are writing dissertations, so she has to work with them several times a week. Still, her workload is light during the summer. The week before last, we finished a big state road paving project early, and I happened to have a free day, which is rare during construction season. I stopped by the university to see if I could lure Anne home for an afternoon of bedroom aerobics, a suggestion she'd normally jump at in a heartbeat. She wasn't in her office, so I peeked into the main office of the history department to see if she was there. 2 female students were copying and assembling a massive project on some professor's paperwork at the front desk. I asked, Hi, I'm looking for my wife, Prophet's Powers. Have you seen her by any chance? The two girls looked at each other, holding back smiles. The blonde girl replied, yeah. She was here the other day. Said she was going to the library. Closing the door behind me, I heard the girls trying unsuccessfully to hold back laughter. Hell, even the kids know she's cheating on me. I walked through the library, and sure enough, no Anne was there. That evening, as I poured each of us a glass of Shiraz during happy hour, I carelessly mentioned, "We finished early today, so I stopped by to see you in the afternoon, but you weren't there. The girls at the front desk said you had just left for the library." I watched Anne carefully. She tensed for a moment, and a slight blush appeared on her cheeks and neck. She looked away as I held out a glass of wine to her. "Oh, I'm sorry. I've missed you. Yeah, I try to spend a few hours every day in the library researching materials for my new book. I didn't realize I'd caught her in a blatant lie. I'm being played for a fool." 2 years after marriage is the best time for a young wife to get bored and start casting glances, and perhaps more than glances, outside the marital fences. Now is she cheating, or am I just being paranoid? I know the answer. I arrived home and the rest of Saturday passed quietly. I did some chores around the yard. Anne made an appearance at a bookstore in Augusta. At least that's what she told me. It's quite possible she's having a passionate affair with her lover right now. When Anne got home at 6, we went to a friend's house for a nice evening and dinner. Everything seems fine, but my stomach turns over every time I look at my cheating wife. We got up Sunday morning and headed to early church. We skipped Sunday school and I made an omelet for brunch. We enjoyed it while we looked at the newspaper together. Anne dropped her unexpected statement on me as we finished our coffee. She smiled mischievously at me, which in the past always heralded some crazy, funny idea, usually sexual. Now I'm just wondering who with. "Honey, I want the house to myself from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock today. Why don't you go golfing? You haven't had that opportunity in a long time. And I want you home at 6 o'clock sharp. I'll have a surprise for you." I stuttered in utter confusion. "What, Anne? Why?" She just laughed merrily. "Well, silly, if I told you it wouldn't be a surprise, would it? Now grab your clubs and golf shoes and go have some well-deserved fun." I was in no mood to argue, so I grabbed my golf equipment and headed for the exit. On the way to the country club, I called Tom on his cell phone and assigned a private investigator to watch the house until I got back. I chatted with the 3 guys at the club and we played a round of golf. My lack of practice and scattered mental state took its toll, and, as the loser, I bought a drink on the 19th hole when we were done. It was actually a pleasant and relaxing day that lifted my sour mood. As I prepared to head home, I texted Tom, watching my house and Anne. "Anything?" Tom's reply followed immediately. "Nothing. As quiet as a graveyard. Mrs. P went out to the garbage can once, that's about it. What's going on? Did she notice our surveillance? Is she really such a brazen slut that she sends me off to play golf while she takes her lover right under our noses?" Our house adjoins a wooded parking lot, and her lover certainly could have slipped in behind us unnoticed by Tom. She's a really smart girl and obviously as cunning as the devil. Do I come home and find Henry there? Am I being kicked out, or has my marriage suddenly become one of those modern open arrangements? Who knows what this woman is capable of? I arrived home at 6, as instructed. I opened the front door and was greeted by Anne, who handed me a scotch with the words, "Right on time, good, I saw you pull up. Here's a drink, come on in, sit at the table, I have a surprise for you." Anne was excited and running on high octane. I have no idea what she's up to, and the whole thing baffles me. It's just like the good old days when we first got married. She nudged me toward my seat at the table. The table was set with our finest silver and china with red wine already poured into our crystal. The candles on the table were lit, creating a festive mood in the room. At least there was no third seat at the table. "Stay here and enjoy your scotch." Anne rushed into the kitchen. I couldn't imagine what my crazy wife was doing. She returned 5 minutes later carrying plated plates that were accompanied by a delightful aroma. Despite my suspicions about Anne, I couldn't help but laugh. "What the hell are you up to?" I said, as Anne quickly placed the plates of food on the table. Anne took the lid off my plate, struck a pose, and said, "Voilà, bœuf à la bourguignonne," with perfect French pronunciation. "Julia Child says this is the most delicious beef dish ever made by man." "Did you cook it?" "No way," I said, laughing. Anne can't cook a hot dog, let alone French haute cuisine. But I cooked it, Anne exclaimed, pouting her lips pretentiously. Henry Manigault is giving me cooking lessons this summer. What? Was my stunned reply. As Anne quickly handed out the food, she chatted cheerfully. Henry's niece, Jean, was working with us on her master's thesis, and her supervisor suddenly had to take a leave of absence for chemotherapy. I picked the girl up at the last minute and worked with her on her thesis. Anne was quiet for a while. She really is a sweet girl. Anyway, we had to scramble, but we got it all done and got through the system. She graduated right on schedule last May. Henry came up to me at graduation to thank me for helping his niece. He said he overheard you all teasing me at the restaurant about how I couldn't cook. Said he'd like to give me cooking lessons as a thank you for helping Jean. Anne shrugged her shoulders and continued chatting. I have some free time in the summer, so I went to his cooking classes at his restaurant a few times a week. It was a little intimidating at first, but it's actually a lot of fun. This dinner is my debut into the culinary world. I should call Henry later and let him know how it went. If you like it, he's willing to keep practicing and is going to greatly expand my knowledge of the art of haute French cooking. How about that? I do have the wife I've always hoped for. Now she can cook on top of that.